The sun had just risen over the family farm, casting a golden glow across the dew-covered grass. Birds chirped from the fence posts, and a breeze rustled through the cornfields as if whispering secrets no one could quite hear. It was a morning like any other, calm, ordinary, and full of promise. Inside the farmhouse, Anna, the girl's mother, packed lunches while humming softly, and their father, Mark, was already out in the barn feeding the horses. Sisters Lily and Grace, ages 8 and 10, had finished breakfast early and, like usual, asked to play outside near the creek behind the barn. "Stay close," Anna had said, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and both girls had nodded eagerly before skipping out the door with their ragged dolls clutched tight. It was a routine they followed often, so common that no one ever thought to worry. Anna glanced at the clock. Only 20 minutes had passed when she stepped outside with a tray of milk to call them in. The front yard was empty. A few chickens clucked in the distance. She called out, "Lily. Grace. Come wash up." Silence. She walked toward the back of the house, expecting to see them by the old tree swinger crouched by the creek, collecting pebbles like they always did. But the swing hung still, and the creek bed was quiet. Only the sound of wind through the trees answered her. Her brow furrowed. "Girls." She called again, louder this time. Still nothing. A feeling of unease bloomed in her chest. She walked faster now, her eyes darting across the yard. She found the dolls lying near the edge of the creek, one face down in the mud, the other torn slightly at the arm. One tiny shoe sat alone in the wet grass, soaked and forgotten. Panic struck like lightning. Mark appeared from the barn, confused by her frantic calls. "They're not here," she said, voice shaking. "They're not anywhere." His eyes widened. Together they searched the property, calling, running from field to field, checking the shed, the treehouse, even the old root cellar. Nothing. The girls were gone. By afternoon, the police were called. Neighbors joined in the search. Drones buzzed overhead, and K9 units followed scent trails that led to the creek and disappeared. Officers questioned the parents. Were there signs of struggle? Enemies? Custody disputes? But there was no logical explanation. No evidence. As dusk fell, the once peaceful farm became a crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off the creek, and floodlights lit up the barn like a stage. But the girls were nowhere to be found. No footprints beyond their own. No drag marks. No vehicle tracks. Just two sisters who vanished on a normal morning, without a trace. And the sound of their laughter, still echoing faintly in Anna's memory, now haunted the air like a ghost. The first 72 hours were chaos. Helicopters circled overhead, casting long shadows across the wheat fields. Dozens of volunteers, flashlights in hand, trudged through thick woods and shallow ditches. The once quiet farmland had turned into a hub of frantic activity, dogs barking, radios crackling, the hum of drones scanning the landscape. But none of it brought Lily and Grace back. Anna sat on the front porch, trembling hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. Her eyes were swollen, her voice raw from calling their names until it hurt. Mark hadn't slept. He paced from the barn to the fence, retracing their steps again and again, as if he could will their footprints back into the dirt. His hands, once used to fixing broken plows and tending crops, now clenched uselessly at his sides. By the end of the first day, local police had set up a temporary command post in the garage. Maps were pinned on the walls, routes marked in red. Officers took turns interviewing the family, trying to find a lead. But Anna and Mark's answers didn't change. The girls went out to play. They were by the creek. Then they were gone. On the second day, a footprint was discovered near the water's edge. Larger than a child's, half erased by the soft mud. It gave investigators hope, but it led nowhere. A nearby barn had signs of old use, scraps of fabric, an old toy train, a blanket curled in the corner. But when forensics arrived, they confirmed it hadn't been touched in months. Suspicion soon crept in. A few officers began looking closer at the family itself. Were Anna and Mark telling the whole truth? Had the girls run away? Had there been arguments? Mark exploded when asked if he had ever raised his hand to his daughters. "I'd give my life for them," he shouted, fist shaking. Anna broke down completely. The community was split. Some neighbors held candlelight vigils and brought casseroles to the house. Others whispered that maybe something darker had happened behind those farmhouse walls. The media made it worse. Reporters stood by the mailbox, broadcasting live in front of the windmill. Headlines screamed, "Two sisters gone without a trace, family holds on." By the end of the first week, the search was scaled back. Rain came on the seventh day, steady, cold, and punishing. It washed away the last of the footprints by the creek. The fields turned to sludge. The police called it routine de-escalation, but to the family, it felt like giving up. The missing posters began to curl at the edges, flapping helplessly in the wind. Inside the girls' bedroom, Anna kept their beds made just the way they left them. Stuffed animals neatly placed. Grace's favorite pink sweater still on the chair. Lily's journal, half filled with drawings of butterflies, untouched. She would sit in the room alone for hours, inhaling the faint scent of shampoo and childhood, hoping some part of them would find its way home. Mark, meanwhile, stopped attending the farm altogether. The corn wilted. Weeds climbed the fences. He spent his time scrolling through message boards, online forums, in dark corners of the internet where other families posted stories just like theirs. Girls lost, taken, never found. They tried everything. Psychics, private investigators, a specialist from out of state who claimed to read the earth. Nothing led to the truth. 3 months in, the girl's case was officially labeled cold. No witnesses, no suspects, no answers. Just 2 names engraved on a bench in the churchyard, beneath a carving of angel wings: Lily and Grace, always loved. Never forgotten. But Mark and Anna refused to move on. Because somewhere deep down, a whisper remained, not of grief, but of hope. A feeling they couldn't explain. That somehow, the girls were still alive. Somewhere. 3 years passed, and the world kept turning, but not for the Harper family. The once vibrant farm had grown still. The white paint peeled from the barn, the vegetable garden lay overrun with weeds, and the wooden swing in the backyard creaked softly in the wind, untouched. Mark and Anna Harper moved like ghosts through their own home, 2 people hollowed by loss. They rarely spoke unless necessary, and even then, their voices were quiet, distant, tired. The townspeople, once invested and full of sympathy, had moved on. Life in Hollow Creek resumed its predictable rhythm. New families moved in. Children played in the park again. The posters of Lily and Grace, once stapled to every tree and storefront, had been removed or faded into ghostly outlines under layers of sun and rain. In local memory, the girls' disappearance became more of a tragic tale, something that happened back then, spoken about in hushed voices if spoken about at all. Some said the girls were taken by someone passing through town, a drifter, a trucker, a stranger. Others blamed the nearby river. "That creek's deeper than it looks," old folks muttered. "Carries things away." A few clung to darker theories: the runaway farmhand who vanished just days before the girls did, or the odd reclusive man who lived in the woods for years and hadn't been seen since. But with no evidence, every theory faded as quickly as it came. Mark, once known for his strength and hard work, barely touched the farm anymore. His hair had turned almost entirely gray, and the lines on his face seemed carved by sorrow. He spent hours each day at the kitchen table with a notebook full of scribbled leads, sightings in other states, articles about missing children, unverified reports. Most were dead ends. Anna, meanwhile, kept the girls' room exactly as it had been. Their twin beds made, stuffed animals in place, backpacks hanging on the hooks. She dusted it every Friday. She told no one. But there was one person who didn't let go. Ethan, the girls' cousin, had been 17 when they disappeared. Now, at 20, he carried their memory like a fire in his chest. While others mourned or forgot, Ethan searched. He walked the woods behind the farm, studied old property lines, took up skills like tracking and navigation. On weekends, he drove to towns 2 or 3 hours away, checking with shelters, gas stations, even bus stops. He carried with him 2 worn photographs, one of Lily, one of Grace, and asked anyone who would listen, "Have you seen them?" His friends called him obsessed. His college professors called him distracted. His parents said, "You need to let go." But he couldn't. He wouldn't. Deep down, something told him the girls weren't gone. He didn't believe in closure, not until there were answers. It was during his second summer back from college when Ethan stumbled upon a new hobby: magnet fishing. Something he saw in a YouTube video, people tossing heavy-duty magnets into lakes, rivers, and creeks, pulling out everything from rusty tools to safes. He tried it once for fun at a nearby bridge and pulled up a bucket full of nails. And then one night, a thought struck him, the creek behind the farm. The very place where Lily and Grace had last been seen. It hadn't been searched in years. No one had gone near it since the floods washed out the lower bank 2 winters ago. Maybe nothing was there. But maybe, just maybe, something had been waiting to be found. That weekend, he packed his gear, gloves, rope, heavy neodymium magnet, and returned to the place where their footprints ended. He didn't know what he'd find. But it was time to search again. Because the girls had vanished. And someone, somewhere, still needed to know why. The sky was a dull gray that morning, clouds hanging low as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Ethan zipped his hoodie up to his chin and crossed the overgrown backyard, boots crunching over dead leaves and brittle grass. The wind was cool, whispering through the bare trees that surrounded the property. The farm looked like a snapshot of the past, untouched, unmoved, and unchanged since the girls vanished. But Ethan had changed. He was taller now, leaner, and carried himself with quiet purpose. The backpack on his shoulders held his magnet fishing gear, gloves, a long coil of rope, and a heavy neodymium magnet the size of a grapefruit. It wasn't state-of-the-art, but it had power. Enough to pull up bikes, tools, even safes, as he'd seen in countless online videos. But Ethan wasn't looking for junk. He was looking for a sign. The creek behind the barn twisted through the woods like a forgotten vein. Once a source of play and joy for the girls, it had since become a place of dread. After the floods 2 years ago, part of the bank had collapsed, revealing jagged stones and twisted roots. It hadn't been searched since. Ethan stood on the old footbridge where the girls had last been seen. He took a slow breath, tied the magnet securely to the rope, and flung it into the murky water. With a splash, it vanished beneath the surface. He waited, feeling the tension in the line. Then he pulled it back, empty. He tried again, and again. A rusty nail, an old horseshoe, a soup can. An hour passed. He moved up the bank, trying different spots, always hoping, always wondering. He was about to give up when, on the final toss, the rope went taut with a sudden jerk. His heart jumped. He leaned back, gripping the rope with both hands, slowly reeling it in. It was heavy, much heavier than anything he'd found before. The weight dragged against the current, and for a terrifying moment he thought it might break loose. But he braced his foot against a tree root and pulled harder. Then, it broke the surface. A box. Small, rectangular, and completely covered in layers of rust, algae, and muck. Metal straps wrapped around its sides, corroded but intact. Ethan's heart pounded as he dropped to his knees and wrestled it from the magnet. He could feel it shaking in his hands, not the box, but himself. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he carried it to the edge of the barn, away from the wet grass, and set it down on an overturned bucket. He pulled on a pair of gloves and grabbed a rusted screwdriver from his backpack. The latch crumbled with a pop, and the top creaked open with effort. Inside, layers of decaying fabric clung to the contents, but the shapes were unmistakable. A small, pink hairbrush. A cracked, plastic bracelet. A toy bunny, its fur matted and soaked through. Ethan's breath hitched. He knew these objects. The bunny had been Grace's favorite. He'd seen her carry it everywhere, even to church. The bracelet, handmade, woven with beads, had Lily's name etched into the center. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in layers of torn plastic, was something even more chilling. A piece of paper. Crumpled, smudged, but still legible. A child's drawing, 2 stick figures, hand in hand, both with red hair like Lily and Grace, standing under a crooked tree. The sun beamed overhead. In shaky, purple crayon letters were the words. "We're close." Ethan stared at it, his throat dry. The picture didn't feel like something buried years ago. It felt recent. Too clean. Too fresh. His mind spun. Could it be possible? Had the girls somehow left this here, years after their disappearance? He clutched the drawing to his chest, the box still open beside him. The wind picked up, scattering dead leaves across the barn floor. Somewhere in the distance, a crow cawed. He had no proof. No fingerprints. No photos. But he had something else, a feeling. A spark of certainty. They were alive. They had been here. And they had left this clue. For someone to find. Ethan sat on the barn floor for nearly half an hour, staring at the contents of the rusted lockbox. The items inside weren't just pieces of the past, They were messages, echoes of Lily and Grace, trapped in time. The drawing, especially, haunted him. It wasn't just childlike scribbles. It was intentional. A clue. A plea. A promise. We're close. The words replayed in his head like a whisper. He examined the image again. Two girls under a tree with crooked branches, drawn in the shape of a wide Y. Not a generic tree, a specific one. He had a gut feeling he'd seen it before. Somewhere on the edge of the property. Maybe in the woods that bordered the creek, a stretch of land thick with brush and largely ignored for years, especially after the floods. The old paths back there were mostly forgotten. Ethan tucked the drawing into a plastic sleeve, packed the items back into the box carefully, and locked the barn behind him. He couldn't go to the police yet, not without something more. Last time he'd brought them a lead, they patted him on the shoulder, thanked him for his dedication, and shelved it with the rest. But this felt different. This was real. He raced back to the farmhouse. The place was quiet, except for the old wall clock ticking in the hallway. His Aunt Anna sat in the living room, staring blankly at the television. It was on mute. A rerun of a cooking show flickered across the screen. She barely looked up when Ethan stepped inside. "I found something," he said breathlessly. Her eyes drifted toward him. "What?" "I was at the creek. Magnet fishing," he explained quickly, holding out the sealed drawing. "I found a box. Their box. With Grace's bunny. Lily's bracelet. And this." She took the drawing with trembling hands. Her breath caught when she saw the handwriting. "This is Grace's," she whispered. "I'd recognize it anywhere." Ethan sat beside her, speaking gently. "There's more. The tree in the drawing, I think I know where it is. That old patch of woods near the east fence, the part no one ever searched because it was flooded." Anna stared at him, her face caught between disbelief and fragile hope. "You think they're still alive?" "I don't just think," Ethan said. "I feel it. They left this behind for someone to find. Maybe recently. Maybe when the creek dried out after last spring." Mark came down the stairs just then, his face lined with the exhaustion of years. "What's going on?" Anna handed him the drawing. Mark didn't say a word for a long moment. Then his shoulders slumped and he sat beside them, brushing a finger across the purple crayon. "I know this tree," he muttered finally. "It's on the far side of the east woods. We haven't been out there in years." "Then we go tomorrow," Ethan said. First light. That night, none of them slept well. Anna held the bunny against her chest and cried silently in her room. Mark stood on the porch long after midnight, watching the woods like they might suddenly speak. Ethan sat in the girls' room, looking at the photos on the dresser. Two red-haired girls, forever frozen in frames. But maybe, just maybe, not lost. The next morning came fast. The sun hadn't fully risen when they set out, cutting through the overgrown fields with boots crunching frost. Ethan led the way, guided by a memory and instinct. The east woods were thick with thorns and brambles. Trees towered above like silent sentries. But after 20 minutes of careful hiking, they saw it, a white oak with branches shaped like a crooked Y. Just like in the drawing. And beneath it, half hidden in the dirt and moss, was something unmistakable. A wooden board, rotten, weathered, covering a dark opening beneath a mound of earth. A shelter. Or maybe, a secret. One that had waited 3 long years to be found. The crooked tree loomed above them, its bare limbs stretching like bony fingers into the gray morning sky. Beneath it, nestled between thick roots and earth, was the weather-beaten wooden board, almost invisible beneath years of moss, leaves, and decay. It looked like nothing at first, just a forgotten piece of the forest floor. But Ethan knew. He had felt it in his bones since he saw that drawing. Mark knelt beside it, running his hand over the soft, damp wood. "We used to use these," he muttered. "Storm shelters. When I was a kid. Tornado season." He glanced at Ethan and Anna, his eyes wide, confused, afraid, and somehow hopeful all at once. "I didn't know one was this far out." Ethan moved quickly, clearing away the debris. The board creaked as they lifted it together, revealing a dark hole about 4 feet across, framed with rotted wooden planks. A thin metal ladder descended into the black. A smell of earth and old rust drifted upward. Anna stepped back, covering her mouth. Mark reached for the flashlight on his belt. "I'm going down," Ethan said. Mark hesitated. "Let me." "No. I need to see." Ethan clicked on the flashlight, gripped the cold metal rungs, and carefully lowered himself down. The temperature dropped with each step. The air grew damp, and the silence pressed around him like a weight. When his boots touched the floor, he swept the light across the space. It was no more than 10 feet by 10 feet, a square box built into the ground. Wooden beams supported the ceiling. The walls were damp, but intact. And it had been used. He saw an old mattress in the corner, covered with a faded blanket patterned with cartoon suns. Nearby, rusted cans of beans and soup sat stacked beside a cracked plastic bowl. A child's sneaker lay in the corner, its pink laces untied. Crayon drawings decorated the walls, stick figures, a dog, a house with a red roof. One showed two girls holding hands under a tree. It was unmistakable. They had lived here. Ethan. Anna called from above, voice breaking. "What do you see?" "They were here," he whispered, emotion catching in his throat. This was their hiding place. Anna descended next, followed by Mark, both moving slowly and carefully. Anna dropped to her knees beside the mattress, running her hand over the fabric like she might feel her daughter's warmth still lingering. "They survived," she whispered. "They were alive. Here." Mark moved to a wall and gently touched one of the drawings. His fingers trembled. They must have escaped, but why didn't they come home? Ethan scanned the room again. In the corner, beside an overturned box of crackers, something caught his eye. A wooden board on the floor, different from the others. He pried it loose, revealing a small hollow space. Inside was a notebook. He pulled it out carefully. It was wrapped in a plastic bag, and inside, a spiral-bound journal with the name, Lily, written in shaky, uneven print across the cover. His heart slammed in his chest. He flipped to the first page. Day 1. "We're in the place. The man said we have to stay. He brings food and says mommy and daddy are gone." Anna gasped. Mark clenched his fists. Ethan kept reading. "Grace cries a lot. I told her it's okay. I don't believe the man. He smells like fire and dirt. We don't talk when he comes. We stay quiet. We don't tell him we hate him." Page after page, Lily had documented their life, or rather, their survival. The man had taken them, hidden them in this shelter, fed them, lied to them. He'd told them the world above was dangerous. That their parents were dead. But slowly, the journal changed. "I heard someone. I think it was Uncle Ethan. But we couldn't yell. We were too scared. We found the door wasn't locked one day. He didn't come back. We waited. We were hungry. Then we left. We walked for days. We met a nice lady and man with a camper. They didn't ask questions. Said they'd help us. They're kind but scared. I don't think they know how to help us go home." The last entry was written in shakier handwriting. "We left a sign at the creek. Someone will find it. I know it. We're close." Anna clutched the journal to her chest and wept. Mark sat down hard on a wooden crate, wiping his face with both hands. Ethan stood in the center of the room, surrounded by their world, drawings, food wrappers, hope scribbled in crayons. "We have to find them," he said, voice firm. "They're out there," Anna whispered. "And they want to come home." It was no longer a mystery. No longer a question of what happened. Now, it was a mission. Lily and Grace had survived the darkness. They had escaped. And they had left behind a trail for someone who wouldn't stop looking. And Ethan. He had just found it. The air above the shelter was heavy with a strange quiet, not just silence but anticipation. As Ethan climbed out, the journal still in his hands, he looked across the woods with renewed focus. The ground beneath his boots no longer felt empty. It felt sacred, like hallowed ground where something unthinkable had happened, and where something hopeful might still begin. Mark and Anna emerged from the shelter after him, visibly shaken, each clutching something from below, a crayon drawing, the small sneaker. Anna held the blanket tightly, pressing it to her face like it was her daughter's skin. Mark, for the first time in years, didn't speak. His eyes were locked on the forest beyond, jaw clenched, chest rising and falling in slow, measured breaths. "We were right," Ethan finally said, the words catching in his throat. "They survived. They got out." Anna looked at the trees, her voice barely a whisper. "And they left us signs. We just weren't listening." They returned to the farmhouse as the morning stretched into a pale afternoon, the sunlight filtered through a gray sky. Ethan laid the journal open on the dining room table. Carefully, page by page, the three of them read the harrowing, heartbreaking details. The girls had been taken by a man known locally only as Red, a reclusive drifter who once worked odd jobs across Hollow Creek. He had shown up on the Harpers' property months before the girls vanished, offering to clear brush and fix fences. Mark had hired him for a week. Then he was gone, or so they thought. According to Lily's journal, he had never truly left. He had been watching, waiting. He took them the morning their parents turned their backs for 5 minutes. He hadn't hurt them, not physically. But he'd kept them locked in fear, controlling them with stories of danger, insisting that the world above was poisonous and their parents were already buried. He fed them just enough to survive, spoke only when necessary, and left for days at a time, locking them in the shelter. Until one day, he didn't come back. That was when they escaped. But their journal revealed how deeply the trauma had rooted itself. Lily and Grace didn't run straight home. They didn't know how. The world outside was terrifying. They were barefoot, dirty, half-starved, and afraid they'd be punished if they returned. When a traveling couple found them on the road miles outside town, the girls didn't tell them the truth. They only gave fake names and clung to one another. Ethan's fists tightened at the thought of how close they'd been. How one twist of fate, one conversation, might have brought them home sooner. The couple, according to the journal, lived out of an RV and moved often. Lily had mentioned the names, Jesse and May. No last names, no license plates, just kindness. They weren't bad people, just scared ones who didn't want to get involved. They'd meant well. They'd kept the girls safe. But they hadn't known the whole truth. The drawing, Ethan said suddenly. It was a message. Mark nodded. And the journal was a map. Anna touched her daughter's looping handwriting. They want to come home. Ethan stood up so quickly his chair scraped the floor. Then we find them. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He scanned every missing person forum, travel blog, and social media page he could think of, searching for the names, Jesse and May, tied to an RV, traveling with 2 girls. Nothing yet. But he wouldn't stop. He couldn't. Back in the woods the next morning, he returned to the shelter alone. He wanted to be close to them. To understand what they saw. What they felt. And as he sat beneath the crooked tree, staring at the dark hole in the earth where they had survived, he heard something that made his pulse quicken, the sound of tires on gravel, coming from the road near the back entrance to the property. A sound so familiar, and yet, not. He stood. The road hadn't been used in years. No one had any reason to come from that way. Not unless they were lost, or coming back. Ethan moved toward the sound, heart hammering, hope flickering. He didn't know who was coming. But maybe, just maybe, the girls had left one more clue. And this time, the world was finally ready to listen. Ethan pushed through the underbrush, heart pounding in his ears as he followed the sound of tires crunching gravel. The woods thinned near the back road that once served as a service route to the eastern fields, long since overgrown and closed off to traffic. But now, a faint trail had been carved through the weeds, just enough for a vehicle to roll through. He paused behind a thick tree trunk, eyes locked on a faded blue RV pulling to a slow stop in the clearing just outside the property fence. Its paint was chipped and sun-bleached, with a small solar panel mounted crookedly on the roof. The back door creaked open. A woman stepped out, mid-30s, with tired eyes and a worn denim jacket. Her hair was pulled back in a messy braid. Behind her, a man in a ball cap emerged, glancing around warily as if expecting someone to stop them. Then, 2 figures appeared in the doorway. 2 girls. Ethan's breath caught. They were taller now, older. No longer the tiny, freckle-faced sisters who used to chase butterflies in the fields. But it was them. Their red hair caught the morning light. Their eyes, wide, searching, cautious, scanned the trees like animals sensing danger. Lily. Grace. They hesitated at the RV's edge, whispering something to the woman, Jessie, it had to be. She nodded and stepped aside, letting them walk ahead. The girls looked nervous, hesitant, like they weren't sure if what lay beyond the trees was real or just another illusion. Ethan stepped out into the clearing. Lily saw him first. She froze. Her eyes narrowed, blinking quickly, as if trying to recognize a face from a dream. Ethan, she whispered, almost inaudibly. He nodded, tears already welling. It's me. It's really me. Grace clutched her sister's hand tightly, the way she used to when she was scared of thunderstorms. But Lily took a step forward. Then another. And then they both ran. Ethan dropped to his knees as they crashed into him, arms flung around his neck, shaking and crying and laughing all at once. It was the kind of moment people imagine when they talk about miracles, but even that word didn't feel big enough. I knew you'd come, Lily sobbed into his shoulder. I told Grace. I knew you'd find us. Grace was trembling, her voice barely above a whisper. We wanted to come home. We didn't know how. Behind them, Jesse and May stood silently, their eyes full of mixed emotions, relief, guilt, awe. Jessie approached slowly, her voice rough with emotion. We tried to keep them safe. We didn't know what to do when they said they were running from someone. We didn't know how to help, until they told us their real names. Ethan stood, holding the girls close as he looked at the couple. You kept them alive. That's what matters. May nodded, her eyes shining. They were brave, smarter than we were. They asked to come back here. We weren't sure we'd be welcome, Jesse added. We didn't want trouble. Ethan shook his head. You brought them home. That's all that matters now. He turned and walked them through the trees, leading them back to the farmhouse. As they neared the clearing, the front door burst open. Anna stood on the porch, mouth open in disbelief, Mark just behind her, frozen in place. Anna stepped forward slowly, as if in a trance. Then she let out a cry, a sound of hope reborn, and ran. Lily and Grace let go of Ethan and sprinted across the field, their bare feet barely touching the ground. Anna dropped to her knees as they collided into her arms, sobbing, gasping, touching their faces, their hair, anything to convince herself it was real. Mark walked slowly, his hands shaking, his face soaked in tears. He fell to his knees beside them, wrapping them all in his arms without a word. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The wind rustled the trees above, soft and gentle. The sun peeked out from behind the clouds for the first time in days, bathing the field in golden light. Later that day, authorities came. News broke. The world that had forgotten their story suddenly remembered. Reporters returned to Hollow Creek, this time with headlines of survival, of strength, of reunion. But the Harpers didn't care about the cameras. Or the questions. Or the noise. All that mattered was this. Lily and Grace were home. And the shelter in the woods. They sealed it shut, together, not to forget, but to honor what had been endured and overcome. It was no longer a place of fear. It was a testament to resilience, love, and the belief that even in the darkest places, hope can grow.